Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a fun one because I am going to be condensing the color story of Colourpop's newest Mega 30 pan palette. Colourpop launched, I don't even know what it's called, let me take a look. The Gettin Fresh palette. I will post a picture of it right here. It's got a neutral base, as most Colourpop 30 pan palettes do, with pops of green and pops of peach. I think it's pretty, and I did consider getting it because I don't have a ton of greens in my collection, but instead I was really stumped for videos and someone said try to, do a duping video, and I was like, ooh, good idea. I can dupe this palette and then I can also try to condense the color story and make a 12 pan palette, because this palette just looks very, very redundant. Like, a lot of shades are duping each other here, and I think that I did a fairly good job at reproducing something similar and just cut out all the bulk, So let me know what you think of my palette. Don't be too mean though. I tried to, maintain the vibe, but just in a smaller, more curated color story. So I'll go ahead and show you my palette. Oh, I'm kind of nervous. I'm so weird like that. I get nervous for the dumbest stuff. This is my palette. Very pretty, all shades from previous Colourpop launches except for this shade here. This is a Natasha Denona from the pastel palette. So yeah, I'll go through my palette and discuss why I chose each shade. I will also swatch out my palette and tell you what shade I used from previous Colourpop launches. So the first shade in my palette is this light cream yellow shade. It's Sweet Much from the Wannabe palette by Colourpop. I used this shade to kind of dupe and represent the first, the first shade in the palette. It's a very, very light, it almost looks golden, very, very light yellow. I thought this would be good as like a highlight shade or to kind of brighten up other things. And since it has like a golden undertone, it would go with the peaches, it would go with the browns and the greens of this palette. Next up, I grabbed this light peachy pink, and this is Reunion from the It's a Mood palette. I used this to represent the shade that's in the first row, fourth column. I just thought it was an important shade because it goes with the whole peach theme, and it kind of ties in the peachy mattes and the orangey toned mattes with a shimmer, if that makes sense. So this is the shade here, very light, very springy, very peachy. And then for the first matte of my palette, I used this shade, which is Bare to Wear from the Nude Mood collection, or not collection, palette. This was meant to represent technically the second row, first column shade, but I feel like there are a lot of browns that are kind of similar in these tones. Some of them might pull a little warmer, some of them might be slightly darker, but I feel like, just including one brown to kind of collectively represent all of them was where I could cut out a lot of bulk in this palette, because it's just like the same thing a bunch of times over with just like minor differences. So this is the shade here. It's a warm, neutral, light brown. I thought it would be neutral enough to kind of pull the very few cool tones that are in the palette, and I think it'd be neutral enough to look good with those, and it's also warm enough to look good with the peaches that are in this palette as well. And next up, I chose a bit of a bronze shade. This was meant to represent the last row, second last column of the palette. I used the shade Heyday from the Sonic Bloom palette, and it's kind of a warm tone bronze, but not too warm to the point where it pulls like rose gold or like peachy or copper. I thought this was an important shade to include just because there are a couple shades like this in the palette. So I thought it was important enough to include it, and also I thought that's also where I could cut out a lot of bulk, is by including just one of these, because there are like 3, maybe 4 even, that are kind of similar to that shade, that are like a metallic neutral. Next up, I used the shade Garden Date from the Sweet Talk palette. It's like a bright peach that has a gold flash that you can see right there. This is meant to represent the fourth column, fourth row shade. It's the only shade like it in the palette, and I thought it was important to the color story because it is a brighter shade. It's one that your eye kind of is drawn to, so I thought it would be important to include something like that. Next up is the shade from Natasha Denona. This is from the pastel palette. It's the shade Zest. It's a cream to powder formula, but I just didn't have a ton of greens in, the shades that I was looking for from Colourpop, so that's why I went with this one. It's more of a pastel-y, almost neonish yellow green. This is meant to represent the second row, second column shade, and I think I did a pretty good job with that one. Again, I thought it was really important because it's one that really grabs your attention. When you look at this palette, I feel like my eye just goes directly to that shade, so I wanted to include something as similar as possible in my palette. But I did cut out some of the greens because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 6 greens, and I didn't want my palette to just be half greens. You know what I mean? I feel like that wouldn't represent the color story as a whole if I was just like half green. So that is one of 2 greens that I chose to include in my palette. Next up is another shade that my eye is kind of drawn to because there's 2 bright shades paired together. So this bright shade is right next to the previous bright shade that I showed you. It's in the second column, the 3rd row. And I used the shade Dream Maker from the Sweet Talk palette. This palette is giving very strong Sweet Talk vibes. It's like Sweet Talk's older sister. So yeah, I used the shade Dream Maker again because when I look at this palette, my eye goes directly to those 2 shades that are right beside each other and both very bright. So I wanted to make sure that those were definitely in my palette and right beside each other, kind of like the other one, because I think that's really like the standout duo for this palette. Next up, I chose this kind of greenish gold shade. There is a similar shade in the palette. I think it might pull more green, but I thought this would be something kind of different that I don't know, I kind of liked it. This is the shade Fairfax from the Off Melrose palette. And as you can see, it's like a really muted green or really like green toned gold. I guess it kind of does represent like another green in the palette, but just kind of more in a neutral way. I thought this shade was really a fun one while still being neutral and being able to be used with a lot of other colors that are in here. So yeah, that's why I went with that one. Next up is the one that's a little bit different because you look at the palette and you think, oh, very warm tones, greens, peaches, and then you look at the bottom left corner and you're like, what? That's kind of strange. It's like a bluey purple duochrome shade. I actually used 2 shades from the Off Melrose palette, and now I don't know which is which. Hold on. Okay, I lied to you. So this greenish gold shade is called Take It Again. My bad. And then this interesting like purpley blue duochrome is the shade Fairfax. My mistake. So I wanted to include this one just because it was kind of the anomaly in the palette, so I wanted to make sure that it was represented. It's just like a neutral purple base with a decently strong blue duochrome shift. Really beautiful shade. Does it go with the palette? Honestly, no. Like if I was making this palette for myself, well, I guess I technically did, but like if I wasn't trying to emulate the other palette so much, I probably would have left it out. But I thought it was important to include just because it is so different from everything else that's in the palette. Okay, so next up I chose a warm toned deeper brown. This is the shade Sweet Talk, no, West Side from the Sweet Talk. I cannot get my names right today. And this is just to represent all of the warm browns that are in that palette, and it goes nicely with the peaches. I used it today to deepen up the peach shade that is in my crease, and I think they paired really nicely together. You can also use it with the bronzes or the greens, or, you know, pretty much anything. I think it needed like another neutral to like kind of ground it a little bit. For the second bright green in my palette, I chose the shade Mary Jane, which is a metallic. This is from the Just My Luck palette, and I think it's perfect for this palette. It really grabs the eye and is super bright and is a nice accent to the other shades in this palette. And lastly, I used a really deep shade to represent the bottom right corner shade. This is Down to Earth from the Off Melrose palette. Super beautiful, love it. I use this one quite a bit. I just think that this palette needed something that could deepen up pretty much everything. So you could use it with, again, the peaches, you could use it with the greens, you could use it with that wild card duochrome shade, the neutrals, pretty much anything you could pair this with. And I think having at least like one really deep shade in a palette is just necessary. So that's why I picked that one. So yeah, this is what the entire palette looks like. I think I did a pretty good job. You guys can let me know what you think, but again, please be nice. What shades would you include or what shades would you take out? I'm definitely open to hearing what you guys think about that. And yeah, so I think that is it for me showing you my little palette and my swatches and whatnot. I did do a little demo on this look if you're interested, so if you want to see that, then just keep watching. Okay, my friends, so I thought I would start off with a little look. I think I really want to emphasize the major pops of color that are in this palette, so I think I'm gonna go peach and green. There are a ton of ways that you could use this palette, but I think I just want to go with something a little more obvious, if that makes sense. So first I'm going to prep my lids. I'm using the e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer in the shade Fair Warm, and I'm just going to blend this out. Then I think I'm going to go right into the bright pop of peach just this shade right here. And I'm gonna place this shade in my crease. I don't know why, but I'm not very chatty today. Who am I? I literally haven't said anything besides what I'm doing in this video. Then I'm just gonna set my brow bone with the Urban Decay Naked The Fix Press Powder. I've just been super tired and kind of burnt out lately. That's probably why I'm not super chatty. I'm really feeling the burnout. Usually I'm a fairly motivated person, but it has just been a year for me so far. And we're not even halfway through. I thought 2022 was gonna be my year because 22 is my favorite number. I was sadly mistaken. Knock on my forehead, hoping nothing else goes like crazy terribly wrong. So I'm just taking the same brush that I applied the peach shade with and I'm just buffing it out. For this eyeshadow being so old, it really blends out quite nicely. When did the Sweet Talk palette come out? Like quite a while ago. I want to say 2017? No, not that long. 2018 maybe? 2019? Yeah, 2019 I think. Then I'm going to take this medium tone brown. I'm going to try this first, and if it doesn't deepen it up enough, I'm going to try this shade. So I'm just going to apply that to the outer corner. I don't know if I want to go deeper, so I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And then if I do at the end of the look, I'll add a little bit more of that deepest shade just to the very outer corner. Then I'm going to take this lighter peach shade and I'm going to apply it to my inner lid. I'm just going to dampen it using my Pretty Fresh setting spray. I'm just going to apply this to the inner portion of my lid. I feel like this shade didn't really apply that nicely. Kind of went on patchy. And then I'm going to take this deeper peach shade right here and I'm going to put that on the rest of my lid. Ooh, that's bright. Ooh, that's a bright peach. Then I'm just taking the same brush and I'm kind of going back and forth between the two shades to blend them together. This is really bright. Then I'm going to take my KVD tattoo liner and I'm going to draw a wing because that's just the mood I've been in lately. I don't really have a mirror to get close up to do this. So we're just gonna wing it. Hopefully that didn't smudge my liner. No, looks okay. It's very pretty, but it's very bright. What I'm gonna do is actually pop off camera and I'm gonna do my base and then I will come back. I don't know why I'm pinching my cheeks. And then I'll come back and I'll do the inner corner. I just like to have like my concealer done before I do that. So I will do my inner corner and lash line when I come back. Okay, so I have my foundation and my concealer on, so I'm gonna go back into that bright pink shade and I'm going to use that on my lower lash line. I'm not going to use the dark brown because I'd like to keep the lower lash line rather light, just like that, something very soft. Then I'm going to go in with the Bare Minerals Strength and Length Serum Mascara. Then I'm going to go in with my pop of green. I'm first going to go into the Natasha Denona shade that I included in my palette. I'm pretty sure this one's cream to powder, so I'm just going to use this as a bit of a base. I actually kind of like that. I really like that just as it is, but maybe I'll add just like a teensy little bit of the shade Mary Jane just to the inner corner. Oh, I have an eye booby. Oh, I just screwed up my inner corner. Crap. Okay, I think I fixed it. I'm just gonna grab a little bit of the shade Mary Jane and just kind of put that closest to my inner corner just to kind of up the vibrancy a little bit. I think that's a really pretty color combo. Colourpop might have been onto something with this one. At first, when I looked at it, I was like, ooh, no thanks, but I kind of dig it. I'm actually really excited about this look now. I think that just kind of like made it. I don't know. I feel very hip and young. Like this is something a Gen Zer would wear, you know? Okay, my friends, so I have officially completed the look. I love how it turned out. I went for a really glowy skin to kind of complete the spring summer vibes. I feel very fresh looking. I feel trendy. I feel really pretty in this look. That being said, I think clearly I can achieve a similar look to that palette with things that I already own in my collection. The only thing is I don't have like a ton of greens. I have the Just My Luck palette from Colourpop and then just kind of like miscellaneous greens throughout my collection and nothing that's really too neon. So that would like be the only thing that's actually lacking in my collection from that palette. All of the peaches and the browns and stuff are things that I definitely already have. I probably have a dupe for every shade in that palette besides the greens. So neons is kind of like a hole in my collection where I think I kind of want to expand my singles. If you have any good suggestions for neon singles or really bright shades, leave them in the comments down below. Preferably affordable, just because I know those aren't colors that I'm gonna use like all the time. So honestly, I'm pretty happy with this palette. I really like the color combo that I created today. I think I might actually leave these singles in this palette for a little bit so that I can, you know, continue to explore and have fun with it. I didn't think I would like it as much as I did. It kind of makes me want that palette, but I'm not gonna buy it because I just know that this is sufficient, but I do really like the color combo. So I don't know. I think this exercise kind of made me like the palette a little bit more, well, a lot more, because at first I was like, that color story. I don't think those two like main bright shades would look good together. Completely different story. You could even have fun and do like a peach upper lash line and like a green lower lash line, or a green upper lash line and a peach lower lash line, peach pop of color on the inner. You could keep things neutral and do like a pop of green. You could keep things neutral and do a pop of pink. Like, so many options, you know? Anyway, yeah, this exercise made me want the palette more, but like in my heart, I know I'm not gonna buy it just because I feel like it's very redundant, and that's why I did this exercise, trying to condense it into a 12 pan. And I just kind of had a hard time like choosing the colors that I wanted to include in my 12 pan, but I had dupes for pretty much every shade that was in there, again, despite the greens. So yeah, overall, still not gonna buy the palette. I think I can get a similar vibe in something much smaller and more compact. However, it does make me like it more. I'm just not gonna buy it. I don't need 30 more eyeshadows, I really don't. And I can get the gist in 12 colors. So yeah, I think that's great. I had a lot of fun doing this. And I think that is it from me today. So thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for watching if you've made it this far. Please don't forget to subscribe if you want to. If you don't, that's okay. I just really appreciate you being here. It helps out my channel so very much by you watching, so thank you. Please leave any video requests you may have in the comments down below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!